Thanks for waiting, everyone. We're going to get started. I'd like to introduce you our speakers this morning. The first one is Jeff Francis. Jeff is Zadara's North America CTO. And the second is Ben Green. Ben is the VP of Product at Centersquare. Jeff, take it away. You're on mute, Jeff.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll go ahead and get started. So to establish a baseline for our conversation today, we wanted to talk about some trends that are in the marketplace, and then also have a chance to go ahead and fit how the Zadara solution set sitting on top of the Centersquare digital exchange helps customers be able to solve some of those challenges. The first thing we're seeing as a trend out there in the industry is we hear quite often, still, working with clients, that ever since COVID, supply chain has been an issue. It's been an issue because you want to be able to buy, the amount of compute and storage that you need, plus a little bit more. And you buy a little bit more because typically your needs grow faster than your ability to go ahead and deploy or expand. You have design time, procurement time, delivery time, lead time, install time, transition operations. All those things take time, and they can delay your time to market or your time to value. This is one of the pressures that we see. The other one on time to market we also see is some people want the ability to try new things. And it can be a big project sometimes. We see clients that are looking for alternatives to VMware, for example. They just want to test something new. Maybe the lead time and effort just to set up has something to do with Hyper-V or maybe Nutanix. It's a blocker. So you have to design a simple environment to do that. Procure or recapture some hardware from somewhere in your environment, install and configure the infrastructure, go ahead and configure the network and all the software devices, probably about 3 to 6 weeks to get started. We're going to talk about solutions where you can get much quicker time to value around these type of solutions. The other things we want to talk about in the beginning here is just the public cloud recalibration. So this one happens in fits and starts, but the public cloud at the hyperscalers, it's a great solution for a lot of things, but it's not the best solution for everything. Some clients, they spend a lot of time and money performing a lift and shift of an on-prem legacy infrastructure. They put that up in the public cloud. And in some recent trends, we're seeing some of those groups are looking for solutions on how to pull those back. Not all applications in a legacy setting work well in hyperscalers. Most often, we hear the reason for that is escalating costs. They're costs that are going up and that are difficult to control. In a recent example, just last week, there was a legacy app that one of our clients has that serves up content. And if you don't redesign that type of an app to use a CDN in a public hyperscaler, the data egress fees could double or triple the cost to host that application. So these are examples of some applications that they did get pushed up into the public cloud, but we're starting to see a few of those come back. So the question is, what can you do about that? The next trend that we see in the marketplace right now is, agility, flexibility, scalability. This is the message of the hyperscalers. And we really believe that this is available also locally with Zadara hosted services inside the Centersquare Digital Exchange. More and more clients are able to achieve that fast time to value, ease of making design changes, expanding capacity, ease at reducing capacity, and pay for only what you use. These themes sound pretty familiar, right? And so that's why we're going to talk about during our discussions today that there are a lot of similarities between these type of offers where one can be well positioned in the public hyperscale clouds and others, it might be a good complement to host those things in an edge cloud in a Centersquare data center facility. We also see on the agility piece, more clients performing A/B tests to improve the customer experience of their applications or to optimize their cost via that flexible infrastructure. With flexible infrastructure, you can clone parts or whole of your application, and you can prepare that for an upgrade or a patch test or a reconfiguration. And you can test your application, see what those tweaks are really going to do, or patch or upgrade. And the nice thing about that is when you're only paying for what you use, you may not need that for 10 months out of the year. So you didn't have to worry about breaking the budget to build a capacity that can handle both your production needs and your non-production needs. You can just provision what you need to be able to perform these type of features. This again makes it a lot easier to do things like A/B testing. Moving on to infrastructure as code. This one's particularly exciting because what we're seeing here is the setup for multi-cloud. We see an increasing number of clients that are using infrastructure as code, tools like Terraform, to be able to define an environment. And what that does is it makes you very portable. So you can be portable between different hyperscalers. Think about Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Think about what we're offering here at Zadara. It also allows you to be very portable between different locations that may be on different tech stacks, even inside the same provider. And so this now opens clients to thinking about, well, if I'm using infrastructure as code, I really can trust that my configurations in my development side, the testing, staging for production, and production are all aligned. And even most importantly, when you put in DR, same thing. Use infrastructure as code, and those things are all aligned. And so this is a benefit we see a lot of organizations catching on to. And I called it exciting because it does allow customers to also start to dabble with, well, I'd like to be multi-cloud. Maybe I'll run this application on Microsoft for a while. Maybe I'll go put it over on Amazon, or maybe I'll go put it in a Centersquare facility on Zadara. The last one to set up for global trends is industry trends is global reach. And so this one is an interesting trend that, again, is now coming about probably since COVID, really. But this is where clients are increasingly looking to store their data and their process information closer to the edge. So there are latency sensitive applications such as virtual desktops. Think about medical imaging systems. These are just a few use cases. Another one's real-time video surveillance, where you've got to have a real low latency connection between the end user consuming this data and the actual place where the data is generated and processed. These are just a few recent use cases, but there are others that we see as follow-ons from what everybody's familiar with in Europe from GDPR. We're seeing data residency is also something that matters nowadays. And so when organizations start to face regulations where data residency matters, really pushing your data out to the edge, so just like a Zadara Edge Cloud at a 6 tera, the Centersquare data center facility, is going to be something that actually allows you those footprint options that you wouldn't have had access to before. So a brief introduction about Zadara, so that we can also talk about what the service scope looks like. So the Zadara Edge Cloud Services is something that, in 2012, we started this map. Everybody's got a map slide, right? So as you can tell already, we have over 500 locations around the world where Zadara is delivering our storage and compute as a service, 24/7 by 365 with high SLAs and at high scale. Our first offer was to offer in 2012 was to offer cloud adjacent storage services. And this is using our patented VPSA technology, which allowed AWS customers access to enhanced features and capabilities like dedicated drives, dedicated controllers to avoid noisy neighbors, things like this, for the first time in the market. This, again, is one of those patented technologies that we hold as Zadara. Today, you can see that we've expanded to over 500 clouds around the world. We cover most of the continents, as you can see. Don't have anything in Antarctica yet, but we're working on it. And the interesting thing to look at this global scale is that for our storage as a service services, which is where we began, we deliver, even to this day, 5 nines of SLA availability for those storage services. So that means 24/7 by 365 at all these locations. We have the automation technology and we have the DevOps staff to be able to support this many locations. And we're doing that with the capabilities you're going to see in the following slide, which is our industry recognition slide. So don't just take our word for it. Over the years, a lot of the analysts have given us accolades. And right now, we're recognized as #1 storage as a service, and that's very flattering. You consider the company that we keep on this slide. These are a lot of really good companies. NetApp's on here, HPE, Dell, Hitachi, Pure. We've been reviewed for our service scope, the service quality, and our SLAs, and have come out as being top on innovation and the things that I just mentioned. This is it is a flattering and humbling thing for us, but it's also something to recognize that we've continued to innovate as the years roll on, added new features, differentiators, and things that matter. So when you consider a solution with your solution architect from Zadara, you can be assured that you're using some of the newer technologies, newer features that are being offered in the storage as a service piece. Moving on to the full catalog where we had Z Compute, you can see here that this is our catalog from a high level. It's a full stack of service that we offer. It is completely elastic. It is pay by the hour for what you use. And as I think about that for a moment, fully managed service with an SLA, completely elastic and pay for use. This sounds familiar to the hyperscaler experience, doesn't it? That's because we've built ourselves in a very similar way. From our very first days, we've always been managed service. We've always been paid just for what you use. We've always been completely elastic. And so what you see in this catalog is that we have VM hosting, VPC, intelligent networking with security groups and other advanced features, load balancers that are managed by our platform, just like the hyperscalers, auto-scaling groups that are connected to those, just like the hyperscalers, Kubernetes, following the EKS blueprint from AWS, and lastly, GPU. These are compute and network function layer services that we also offer locally hosted in those Centersquare data centers on the digital exchange, so you get low latency. And one differentiator that we have with the public hyperscalers is that we don't have data egress fees. So this means that where a lot of solution architects, design architects, whatnot, are thinking about how they design their applications around some of these capabilities that exist in the hyperscalers, but also they look to avoid some of the egress fees. You can be much more direct with the design with these particular services here, because you don't have to worry about avoiding those type of features. You get 100 gigabit Ethernet for each tenant that connects to our cloud that's inside of each of the Centersquare data centers. And that's 100 gig Ethernet per tenant. Now, at the bottom of the slide, want to again point out that our storage services are going to be differentiated from your experiences in the hyperscalers. You're going to have a lot of the same great capabilities, but they also have the capability of having dedicated drives. So if you have sensitive applications that are really sensitive to noisy neighbors, the data is not something that can be permitted to be stored on shared media, we've got you covered. This is where, again, we're different in the marketplace. We're patented for this, to be able to offer file, block, and object appearances from a common cloud that we have. We dedicate and allocate resources on a tenant basis. And it also comes with managed services around it to manage backups, manage remote mirrors, manage snapshots, the whole bit that you would typically get from an enterprise storage array. Those are features that we offer, including another one, which is auto tiering, which again, you can allow the Zadara to handle the management of your hot data, stays on all flash. Your cold data goes off to spinning disks. You don't have to tell your applications about it. We'll do that in the background for you. So now we get an illustration of what this looks like inside of the Centersquare Digital Exchange. You can see right here that if you're talking about an application, maybe you've got production on the west, and you've got your alternate to production, maybe your DR site over on the east. Plus, you want to connect to some of your partners that could be up on the hyperscaler clouds. The digital exchange ties all of this together for you and does it with a very high-speed network fabric. We're going to hear more about that coming up in a few more slides. But this is done on purpose, that having these Zadara edge cloud locations inside of the Centersquare locations allows you as a customer, when you're in a Centersquare facility, you can choose between consuming these storage and compute assets locally at high speed, or if you're looking to protect data or run alternative sites, you can put them across the digital exchange at another Centersquare location. So, and again, you see here that we have all the popular hyperscalers that are also on the network. And we also have the ability to do other on-demand networking services through Centersquare to be able to connect to, maybe you have a home office, maybe you have data centers of your own that you want to integrate with this larger picture. So Ben, we'll hand it over to you and you can do the introduction of Centersquare.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And that was a great intro. And I think before I dive into a bunch of value and technical information about Centersquare as a whole, I think it's important to say we are Centersquare, right? So we're a new company. We're probably one of the biggest technology companies that you haven't heard of if you haven't heard of us yet, but we have a rich heritage. We come through the merger of two really kind of powerhouse retail co-location providers, and we've relaunched as Centersquare as of April 2024. So what does that mean? What do we do? How do we fit into this complement the hyperscale story? Jeff, if you don't mind advancing a slide. Here's our map slide, right? So within our DNA, we are a data center operator, right? So we operate over 40 facilities, primarily in North America. We do have some international presence in Canada and UK, but we're in 10 out of 10 of the top data center markets in this region. And, you know, really our DNA, our bread and butter is keeping mission critical facilities up and servicing our clients within them, right? So our core business is, you know, across our footprint, we have over 400 megawatts of power with, you know, about half that and additional build out capacity just with what's right in front of us. We have lots of clients that bring their systems into our sites to co-locate that hardware, to manage that hardware, and to run their mission critical systems. The other really large side of that business is interconnect, right? So across these 40 plus data centers, one of the most powerful things about our brand and our business is the diverse ecosystem that we have built into these sites. So we have over 2,500 clients, some of the biggest enterprises, technology companies, service providers in the world. And that density of ecosystem drives a lot of interesting things, right? One is it drives a lot of network providers to build into these sites. So we have incredible network access. You see that we interconnect over 50,000 cross connects today. From a networking standpoint, not only do we have kind of great core and edge locations, but we're also highly cloud adjacent. So as a complement to the hyperscalers, for many of these digital exchange locations, you're within a 3 millisecond concentric ring of any of the major cloud on-ramps. So hybrid IT is in our DNA. But more than just servicing kind of data centers and raw power and cooling and fiber, we're also a technology company, and we really have a long, rich heritage to this. And you know, I think before I spin a real web there, it's important to understand in a cloud world, right? And I think Jeff hit on the virtue of the public cloud. It gives you agility. There's infrastructure as code, right? You have this ability to spin things up and spin things down. Who wants to be running and operating a data center anymore? And the reality is there's a lot of folks and there's a lot of reasons for that. So typically what drives people to a solution like a Centersquare data center is one of three things, right? One is control, right? We have a lot of clients, you know, people typically think financial services, healthcare, but we have a lot of enterprises that secure really critical information. They have their own intellectual property, right? There's things that they just don't want to forego or pass management or control to another provider. So they choose to own and operate their own hardware or their own networks within a co-location facility. Just as big as control as we see cost, right? At a certain scale, or if you have systems that run 24/7, I don't think it's a bold statement to say that you can depreciate that hardware. You can run in a colo at a much lower total cost of ownership than the public cloud, right? And that's a debate that'll go on till the end of time. But I can tell you with certainty, if you have workloads that run 24/7 and you have teams that can manage that stuff, you can run a lot cheaper in a data center. But the other big area where we see clients coming into data center environments and not going whole hog into the public cloud is where they have complexity within their environments. And I talk to CIOs all the time. I talk to all sorts of small and medium and large businesses. Everybody has legacy applications. Everybody has complexity in their security and network architecture. Everybody is looking at AI solutions now and these ultra performant things that require insane speeds and insane chips that to leverage that stuff in a public cloud at scale gets incredibly expensive. So complexity, whether clients want it or not, drives them to hybrid environments, right? And when we say hybrid IT, it usually means, if there's a better way, use it, right? Don't go all in on one thing, right? And typically where data centers come in is around that complexity, control, and cost element, right? So what do clients forego for all those great virtues, right? It's great to have cost containment, control, and the ability to support really complex architectures. Typically what they lose in a data center environment is agility and flexibility, right? You're confined to a cabinet or four walls. You have to buy new hardware. It's not simple, as Jeff said, to spin up and spin down applications in that framework. So as a technology company, really where I live on the product side is we develop products to help make the consumption of our data centers more seamless and easier for our clients. And we work with incredible partners like Zadara that kind of carry that charge with us, right? So to where we don't want to build our own products, we augment and we partner and we find the right providers for our clients. And Zadara is hosted in all these facilities and has services on tap. So Jeff, if you don't mind advancing a slide, we will we'll drive a little bit into what the digital exchange is and what that means, right? So when I talk about the Centersquare platform, really the core of that platform is our data center presence, right? It's these 40 plus data centers. It's all the fiber in them. It's the staff. It's the operations that keep these facilities up 100% of the time. But again, to go back to that agility thing, right? What we find is a new client entering a dedicated data center environment, you're really looking at 3 to 6 months to spin something up. From the time you've selected a site till you've bought the hardware, till you've had your gear installed, till you've QA'd it and tested it and burned it in, you're really looking at a minimum of 3 months on time to value. So the question is how can we as a data center provider and how can we partner with folks like Zadara to make that a lot faster, right? So one of the foundational parts of any data center build is actually the network. You have to get internet connectivity. You have to get MPLS connectivity. You have to build a LAN. You have to be able to provide firewalling and subnetting and all these things so that you can actually build gear and bring services into the site. At its core, the digital exchange platform is a managed network fabric that sits within our data center facilities. So without getting too terribly technical, we've built out really an operator grade super spine fabric that lives within these facilities. And we've written a clever piece of software that we call the digital exchange that allows clients to basically tap into that fabric that we build and manage and leverage it for a variety of reasons, but principally to connect to other things in the data center, right? And the reason you might want to do that is, again, you build in a traditional co-location environment, whether you're in a single rack or you're in a big cage, you're confined to those four walls. And anything that you put within those four walls, you have to build, buy, and manage. Really what this allows you to do is securely kind of stretch your existing environment out to a number of different endpoints that we make accessible via the digital exchange. So what are those endpoints? You can stay on this slide, Jeff. One of them is the public cloud, right? So I talked about how we're highly connected to the public cloud. A large majority of our clients will always have something that's running in AWS, Azure, Google, Salesforce, where it may be. So we do provide direct layer 2 access from the digital exchange to those environments. The other is Centersquare. We have our own suite of on-demand services, principally at the hardware and connectivity level. So we offer bare metal compute for clients to spin up on demand. They can access basically an entire compute host that they have control of. We also have connectivity solutions around data center to data center connectivity, VPN, some layer 3 routing, and a variety of other things that clients can take advantage of. But as Jeff, I think, intimated in the previous slides, you can also connect out to our partner base. So now with the click of a button through our software-defined fabric, and Zadara has 100 gig Ethernet access provisioned into this fabric, you can stretch VLANs out to Zadara cloud services to natively build greenfield in a Centersquare data center or to augment what our clients already have in those sites. And we'll talk through some of those use cases as we go through here. But there is one important thing, I think, just from a design philosophy and how we go about building these services and interrogating partners like Zadara. We're very mindful of those 3 C's, that control, that compliance, the complexity that we talked about earlier. So anything that we do as a technology company, we build to integrate to our clients. We don't put any ugly control planes in front of their good control planes, right? We don't make them NAT or PAT or do anything crazy with their networks. We integrate natively at layer 2, right? The other design criteria is security, right? So again, clients come to these locations because they're highly secure. So these environments are highly vetted, highly penetration tested, and highly cordoned off so that our client data is protected. And, they're the only one that have access and the ability to see this data. And the third thing that I do think is important, we're talking about data centers, which again is a very manual world, but really what we're doing with this framework is trying to automate that data center. So everything that we do in the digital exchanges, we have an automate first mentality. So we can play the infrastructure as code game when it comes to the provisioning of colo and bare metal and networks. And then we can partner with great providers like Zadara that can orchestrate the build of storage systems and VMs and services natively that live on top. So with that, Jeff, I think you can advance.
Yep.
And I will
So
hand
let's
off to you, sir.
Yep, let's talk about a couple of use cases. Now that we understand what the service catalog looks like and some of its features, the discussion comes up a lot about lift and shift of legacy environments. The first thing I'm going to say is that a lot of times applications and those environments need to be redesigned to be able to fit in the modern networking structures of the hyperscalers, the VPC model specifically. With Zadara Compute, you have an option that you can turn on down at an individual project level, and it'll go ahead and emulate VLANs just like you get with VMware ESX. And so this means you can bring over environments to our cloud, and you can get pay-for-use type of capability. You turn it up, turn it down, turn it off for the weekends, whatever you like to have. You only pay for what you use, and you don't have to redesign those environments. And so that's one use case that we get a lot of traction with because we are unique in the market where we have both the VPC model and what's called DVS, distributed virtual switch mode model of networking. So again, the idea there is we can migrate you over, and or as Ben mentioned, we can do a stretch VLAN from your environment inside your cabinet into a part of our cloud. Our automation on the security side, our automation ensures that there's no duplication across any of the different tenants, including our operations accounts. And so it segregates and makes sure that your VLAN could stretch into this fabric. And you can have VMs that they're not aware if they're running on your VMware farm estate, or if they're running in the Z Compute side, they can share the same layer 2 and layer 3 address space. Let's talk about cloud adjacent infrastructure. This was our first use case, and it's still a popular one. This is where literally some customers, they want to have their data just outside of the cloud that they're in right now because they want to be multi-cloud now or in the future. In this particular use case, what you're going to find is that it's the high-speed backbone of the digital exchange is going to make a difference and really open the eyes of some of the architects to, well, what if your data didn't have data egress fees attached to it? And that's where the cloud adjacent infrastructure really helps. Now, it also expands into compute. You could have workloads up in AWS, and you can use a VPN to go from your AWS address space into an address space on Z Compute inside of a Centersquare data center across the digital exchange. And that'll allow you twofold. There could be workloads that you put inside the Z Compute that actually publish information to partners or other areas, and you don't have to worry about those egress fees. And they still have access to all the great services up in the hyperscaler. Maybe you're using some of their IoT proprietary technologies or some of the other things that they offer. So cloud adjacent infrastructure isn't just about parking your data next to one of the mega centers of Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. It's also about being able to cherry pick, if you will, what parts of your infrastructure might be best suited to go to put in a Centersquare facility with all the high-speed access we talked about, the lack of the data egress fees. And lastly, you're going to find that discounting just works a lot better inside the Zadara solution inside of Centersquare, where the short on this is that in the hyperscalers, they have on-demand prices, and then they have discounted prices if you leave it turned on for 12 months or leave it turned on for 36 months. In the Zadara model, we get to discounting for terms. We trade term length for discounts. And in that one, everything you use on demand is at that discounted rate. So you can look at some of your infrastructure that might be in a public cloud today. And if it really is transient in nature, you need to turn it off on the weekends. That's 2/7 of the week. You could do that down in a Centersquare facility, and you'd actually enjoy a savings for turning it off that way. Talking briefly about backup and DR, this is a wide topic, and it comes up also very often. This one's probably tied for lift and shift. What we see is a lot of organizations are either looking at new ways of doing backups. They hear about bulletproof backups with Veeam. They hear about Commvaults also, and those are the two most popular that we see with immutable object storage. And the idea is if you can have 3 copies of your data running in 2 different places, one on a different offline medium that's been protected, that's where the immutable object storage comes into play. You now have, a ransomware-proof solution for your enterprise. And what it took for anybody that's already in a Centersquare facility to be able to do that is the one action of getting immutable object storage at a remote Centersquare data center across the digital exchange. And you can utilize products such as Commvault and Veeam to start doing backups immediately. And this will give you that 3-2-1-1 protection that gets you that next level of bulletproof backups. Now, attached to that DR, there's methods of DR where you can restore from archives if that's required. That's a lower cost operating way of doing it. And again, you can be assured that there would be infrastructure you would go ahead and identify in a remote Centersquare facility for your DR landing spot. Or we have third-party bolt-ons to our product that will allow you to do a continuous replication from one Centersquare facility to another Centersquare facility across the high-speed digital exchange network. And that'll allow you to have a warm landing place so you can, out of the blue, test DR, use DR, do whatever you like. And that's a very rapid model for being able to have really tight RPOs and RTOs. And this one we're seeing more and more because organizations are asking more and more for those. Moving along through the typical use cases, storage refresh. This one also sounds pretty obvious, but I want to give a little bit more of insights on this one. So when you're looking at your storage, you're thinking, well, okay, this thing is getting long in the tooth. Please keep in mind that whatever you buy here in 2024, you might be using, we're using 18 terabyte drives on the spinning disks, and we're at 7.68 on the SSDs. In the future, when the next level of higher density drives come, with the Zadara storage cloud, you simply raise your hand and say, you know what, I'd like these 18s swapped out for 22s. Or maybe the 7.68s, when they come to be 15 tera, I think they're marketed as 16 terabyte drives, you're going to see a reduction in your cost per X stored. So it's cost per terabyte per month that you measure. In the last time we saw for the SSDs, when they went 384 to 7.68, we saw over a 20% reduction in cost per gigabyte stored per month. And that was just due to the fact that the higher density drives are able to get better economics once they've settled in the market for about a year. Same thing goes with the hard drives. The hard drives had less of a stair step. They were about a 12% reduction. But the reason we bring this up is that, one, you can't buy the wrong thing with Zadara because you just shut it down and you buy something different. But two, if you're looking at a storage refresh, you really may want to take a look at doing file block or object with the Zadara storage as a service. It's very highly reviewed. It's got 5 nines of SLA, so you're going to be in good shape there. And lastly, you'll be able to take advantage of new storage media as it comes to the marketplace. On infrastructure optimization, this really is that agility message. And so just reminding that the ability to make changes, the ability to clone entire environments and be able to tweak, what if the storage layer had higher IOPS? You could go ahead and juice up these fine-grained controls on a Zadara VPSA. What if you added another web server or another app server to the tier? Your ability to really tweak things and see the outcome for both the user experience and see the outcome for what it takes to host the infrastructure for that application are something that you can do well versed on our platform. And you don't have to be worried about, if you were doing this yourself in your own cabinet, you'd have to have that amount of additional infrastructure with the hardware that you have today. You can use our additional infrastructure for your burst, or you can put your production on us and you can make a copy on top of Zadara. The last message, again, also sounds as intuitive as the storage refresh. If you are looking at your infrastructure that you have capital expense right now, and you're thinking that you may be coming up for a renewal or a new version of things in the next year, you probably want to have a discussion with your Centersquare representative and get a Zadara solution architect involved, because we may be able to show you ways that, to repeat that message briefly about you can't buy the wrong thing with the Zadara solution. If you end up having a bigger appetite for object storage this year, and next year you'd rather do more compute and all flash, it's as simple as raising your hand and trading out those technologies one for another. In a Zadara solution, what you're really tied to for discounting is the level of spend that you have. And it's a much more attractive level of spend than you're looking at with some of the hyperscalers. The ability to change out one technology for another is pretty ubiquitous. And so that's where, again, we can make a lot more freedom available to you if you use us in an OpEx type of a model. Those are our typical use cases. Now we're going to dive into a couple of interesting customers. And so here, wanted to talk about a healthcare client that, like many organizations, their amount of data that they're storing year over year is mushrooming. Now, the value of that data is also higher value than it's ever been before. Think about healthcare and all the things that they could learn about their constituents at a summary level. So what they were looking for is they wanted that next level of performance and the next level of scale for object storage. And so they were able to get that on the digital exchange at their Centersquare facility. They were really attracted by the fact that we could get them redundant 100 gigabit Ethernet interfaces for their backup workloads. And, at the end of the day, what they got is the bulletproof backups with Veeam. And they also got the ability to assure that they'll be able to make their backup windows because the network bandwidth was so high and the object storage was able to keep up compared to the architecture that they came from before. So we were able to improve their capabilities at the same time as moving them to an on-demand model with the Zadara locally in their own data center. And then Ben, we'll let you take these two.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll try to move quickly through these, but a couple of use cases. Again, both of these were Centersquare clients within our data center, and one way to go back to just kind of our ecosystem and our digital exchange is really what we give enterprise architects that operate these types of environments. We give them a lot of arrows in their quiver in terms of how to solve problems. So this specific company was running in Centersquare data centers. They were running in a dedicated environment where they owned all the hardware, they owned all the storage, they owned all the networking gear. And basically they were a fairly large financial services company that not only built technology for themselves, but they also built technology for constituent organizations within their field. So there was a lot of highly compliant, highly secure information in this environment. But over time, their level of resourcing as an operations team had gone down, right? So for them to continue managing a full stack environment and all that goes with it was putting a lot of pressure on them. And they were also feeling financial pressure from the board to take a look at a cloud first solution or a cloud first narrative, right? So, luckily we were able to get in with these folks before they went all into the cloud. And quite frankly, their biggest hesitance to going all into the cloud was they weren't able to refactor these applications, right? This was going to be a lift and shift. And I think as Jeff alluded to earlier, I think time has told that that's not a great idea. I mean, to the extent that you can architect platforms to operate in the cloud and be stateless and spin up and down, there's potential, right? But if you're just picking up a VM and moving it over there and you're hoping for success, a lot of times that doesn't come, right? So we're able to work with them. We're able to architect a solution wherein they moved the entirety of their compute infrastructure into Centersquare bare metal. They had an incredibly large storage requirement. Both, SAN storage, file storage, as well as backup and archive repositories that through the digital exchange network, through Zadara and their ability to deliver VPSA, virtual private storage services, and all those different varieties, we're able to do something pretty cool for these guys where we've actually built up a multi-site environment. They have multi-petabyte scale. They have full disaster recovery availability with storage replication, as well as offsite immutable backup copies in Zadara object storage. And they've gotten out of this posture of having to manage a bunch of hardware in the data center, but they still have full control. They still have full visibility into their environment. And their engineers are now focused on the stuff that they want to be on. And because of this, not only did it get them out of the position and get them in a more cloud-like operating model, but we also saved them a ton of money versus going to the public cloud, right? So I remember when we put these proposals in front of the client, they told us to raise the price because it looked like a joke compared to what they were getting to the public cloud environment. So that's not a dirty sales tactic. It's there to say that at sufficient scale, there's real benefit on running in the data center on these types of platforms where you can consolidate that and manage that yourself. If you go to the next one, Jeff. The next one, again, is another existing data center colocation customer from Centersquare. And what we find with a lot of our clients, just like the last one, is they find themselves in precarious positions quite often, whether it's through equipment failures, financial friction, whatever the case may be. You know, it's hard to engineer your way out of problems. And these folks were running literally tier 1 applications that were responsible for passing billions of text messages and calls a day between different carriers on cellular networks. And the hardware supporting these applications was long in the tooth, like 7+ years old. And they were not in a position to migrate to new platforms. Their support contracts were getting incredibly costly, and their storage arrays were kind of dying a slow death, right? Disk failing all the time. Renewing support was a challenge. So we introduced them to Zadara. They connected through the digital exchange, and initially they were just bringing on new customers and new storage augmented onto Zadara. But over time, they've actually migrated a good deal of data off of those legacy platforms that they owned. It's running on a managed Zadara solution. It's connected through the digital exchange fabric in a completely secure fashion. And what that effectively buys them is the ability to continue operating these environments without all this tremendous risk and cost that they were in there before. And what's really cool is they're able to do that in a legacy data center environment only by virtue of having an ecosystem like Zadara that's literally local to these data centers and having connectivity options through Centersquare, whether it's virtual through the digital exchange or whether we're running direct fiber between the cages. We really do, we make the art of the possible high in terms of helping clients afford flexibility in these types of environments. So I think with that, we're wrapping and ready for Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Ben. If you have a question, please pop it into the Q&A box below your screen there at the very bottom, or the chat box. And we'll take a few minutes to answer any questions you may have. Don't be shy. Oh, we've got a question. What virtual desktop platforms do you support on your edge cloud services?
So we're certified to run Citrix. We're also certified to run Inuvoca, and Inuvoca is up and comer, if you will, talking about capabilities. We have more of those deployed. But those are the two platforms you see on Zadara the most.
And another question we have, can I migrate VMware workloads to Zadara? If yes, what makes this easier than lift and shift to a hyperscaler?
Yep. So the point we were previously making about the fact that you can stretch the VLANs from inside of your cabinet across the digital exchange into the Zadara cloud fabric, it allows you to have more options of how you're going to lift and shift those workloads. The two quick areas are, one, you don't have to migrate everything at once. If you have applications that have redundant components, maybe dual web servers, app servers, database servers, you can take them one at a time across the bridge into Zadara, and that way you don't have to take downtime with your application. The second thing that's really nice about doing it this way is you don't have to redesign your environment. If you're VLAN-based today, you've got Cisco Secure Networking, if you're a Juniper-powered network, any of those things, they'll play with us because we can do the DVS mode, and we'll interact just like ESX server, where it's all VLANs and not the VPC.
Great, thank you. Also, what do you mean that a customer can take advantage of lower cost storage when higher density drives are released to the market?
Yeah, and so just doubling down on that message, we've seen it in the last two stair steps for both the the digital media, the SSD, and also the HDD, where every time a new drive form factor comes to the market from many of the popular manufacturers, it takes about a year or so for them to settle in, and we certify them after a period of time that we can guarantee mean time between failures. But once we see that technology is firm and it's settled, we get a good MTBF. When we bring them to the catalog, you'll see lower cost per gig stored per month. And with the SSDs, you're typically going to see the form factor is going to double. So what was marketed as a 4 terabyte drive then went to 8 terabytes. The next step will be 16 tera on top of that, and they'll go up there. So customers can go ahead and contact their Zadara technical account manager and say that, let's say when 16 terabyte drives come, that they would like to be hosted on that. And we'll go ahead and implement a 16 terabyte fabric. We'll go ahead and do a background migration. We manage that for the customer, and then we'll cut them over to the new fabric. So you get to enjoy the better cost savings, and we take care of it as a managed solution.
Thanks, Jeff. How do I find out more about Centersquare locations and services?
Yeah, well, we have, I believe, an email address where you can send information, but ultimately our website, centersquaredc.com, has a bunch of information, and you can also reach out to me, and I'll follow up.
Great, thank you, Ben. There are no further questions at this time. So we'll close it out. Thank you all for attending. I will send out a copy of this webinar, the recording, as well as the slides. So you can share those with maybe those who weren't able to attend on this call. And thank you very much.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.